Question 5. Which compound has the highest boiling point? So immediately I'm looking at that OH there. We've got an oxygen bonded to a hydrogen, so we've got hydrogen bonding between molecules of this propan-1-ol. So the way that a hydrogen bond works is that you've got an oxygen bonded to a hydrogen, or a nitrogen bonded to a hydrogen, or a fluorine bonded to a hydrogen. Then there's very different electronegativities. Oxygen, nitrogen and fluorine have very high electronegativities compared to the hydrogen, so you get very large delta minuses set up on the O, the N and the F, and large delta pluses set up on the hydrogen. So it's a very polar molecule, and then on a neighbouring molecule there's hydrogen bonding, so there's intermolecular hydrogen bonding between these two very polar molecules. The others, we've got an aldehyde, we've got a ketone, we've got an ester. Now these have carbon to oxygen polar bonds, but they're not as polar because the difference in electronegativities between the carbon and the oxygen is not as great as it is between the oxygen and the hydrogen. So even though they're polar, these bonds, then you don't get the same kind of intermolecular attraction. It's not as strong between these kind of polar bonds. You get something called dipole-dipole attractions, but they're not as strong as a hydrogen bond that's got a very polar bond in its molecule, and therefore A is the answer. 6 is a very ambiguous question because it says what's the correct order of melting points in these period 3 elements, and it doesn't tell you whether it wants high to low or low to high. So it's difficult, very ambiguous. So assuming it wants high going down to low, that seems to be the way it's going, then what have I got? Well, argon and chlorine are gases, so they're going to have lower melting points than solids like phosphorus and sulfur. So I'm going to rule out B and D, and so I'm going to go for either A or C. So I've got chlorine and argon, so that's not going to help. Argon does have the lowest melting point because it's single atoms. Chlorine is a diatomic molecule, 2 Cl atoms bonded with a covalent bond, and so that's a larger molecule with more electrons, so that's going to have more van der Waals forces than an argon. The question is, which has got the higher boiling point then? So higher melting point, sulfur or phosphorus? And your answer is sulfur. So sulfur is a larger molecular structure than phosphorus, and with it being larger, then it has a higher melting point. So sulfur with a higher melting point than phosphorus. Your answer is